From rent to roommates, empowering our students with housing knowledge. Thank you so much for being here today. I know it's a busy time of year for educators and everyone in the school, so I definitely appreciate your time. And as always, I'm honored to see some repeat names here. Thank you for joining us again for this training. We are going to do a Kahoot as one of our welcome games. So if you would like to join the Kahoot with we have the game pin there, but I'm also going to go ahead and put the pin in the chat if you would like to join as we move forward through our intro. And Linda, have we started recording?
Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. As I said, welcome to this presentation by the Financial Education Public-Private Partnership. I am so excited today to talk to you about housing, a incredibly important topic that has become so much more relevant in the last few years. A few housekeeping items. If you have not, please do sign into the chat with your name and school or district. That will be the first step in getting you the clock hours that you so richly deserve for being here this evening. We will make sure that these slides and resources will be available to you after the presentation, both available for download in PD Enroller and included in a post-webinar email as well. You will receive an email from PD Enroller in which you will rate and evaluate this training. And that is the second step to making sure you get those clock hours. Did I miss anything, Linda? And as
that covers it. Thank you.
Thank you. Please feel free to use the chat to share ideas and questions. And if you would not mind, just for the presenters, as it's always easy to see faces, or always easier to speak to faces rather than blank screens, if you're able to have your camera on safely, I really do appreciate that. Thank you. All right, I would like to begin with a land acknowledgement. And this is a map from native.land.ca, our home on native land. And while I normally come to you from the Spokane area and the homes of the Spokane tribes, I am coming to you today from the Olympia area. But as always, FEP wishes to recognize the Indigenous peoples who have been dispossessed and displaced from their ancestral and spiritual homes and the taking of their land through colonization. We want to acknowledge that the land holds the spirit of the place through its knowledge, culture, and all the original peoples since time immemorial. A brief introduction for those of you I have not had the pleasure to meet before. My name is Amy Cleaver. I currently serve as the K-8 program supervisor at the Financial Education Public-Private Partnership. I am a Pacific Northwest girl, born and raised, as I mentioned, in Spokane, Washington. I completed my BA at the University of Portland and my master's in elementary education at Eastern Washington University. My background is in the classroom. I've had experience from PK all the way up to adult learners, mostly in ESL instruction with adults, but I focus mainly on 5th grade and 7th grade math, social studies, and social emotional learning. I like to refer to myself as a financial wellness work in progress. I mention financial wellness a lot in my webinars. I believe that that is the overarching goal of financial education, is to reach a state of financial wellness where we are allowed to pursue our dreams. We have the financial freedom to pursue our dreams, and our finances are a part of our overall physical, mental, social, and emotional well-being. And we, as always, the Financial Education Public-Private Partnership, or FEP, thanks you for being here. We were established in 2004 by the Washington State Legislature, with our goals being to increase access to high quality, diverse financial education for all of Washington's K-12 students and educators. We do this by reviewing financial education instructional materials, developing a clearinghouse of those resources at our website, fep.org, and providing professional development and training opportunities like this one. We also facilitate an exciting grant opportunity. If you are, excuse me, if you are interested in that, I recommend check out our website. We have some fantastic open office hours that you can learn more about that. And today, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about housing. We have an hour together today. So we're going to look at some context. We're going to look at the housing crisis and make sure we all feel confident explaining that in a way that meets our students' needs. We're also going to focus on some lessons. I'm going to share with you lessons from Keys to Financial Success, Keys for Financial Success, which is a turnkey financial education curriculum developed by the Philadelphia Federal Reserve. So we're going to go through the resources we'll be sharing with you. And then I have also converted those resources, that lesson, into a PowerPoint form for your use. So we'll go through the first lesson in that unit together so you can see the PowerPoint we'll be sharing with you. All right, so here's our first participant question. Just as a kind of introductory question, I would love to know, if you don't mind answering in the chat, what year, and again, no judgment here, what year do you rent your first apartment? You can, if you don't want to tell us the year, you can just tell us how old you were when you rented your first apartment. And how much did you pay in rent? So I will go ahead and start. I was 22. I was just out of college when I rented my first apartment in Portland, Oregon, off of 23rd Ave. It was a studio. It was very small. I don't even remember the square feet, but I do remember Wi-Fi was included in the rent, which at the time was kind of amazing. And I paid $600 for my studio. Linda, do you remember Orlando?
So I can tell you mine was I splurged though, because it was later. I was out of junior college and I had a one bedroom apartment that had a swimming pool in the complex. So I paid $800 a month and was feeling pretty high and mighty.
Linda?
Yeah, mine was in about 1995 in Portland, Oregon, for about $450 for a 2-bedroom.
Oh my gosh. And thank you. So many people are participating in the chat. This is fantastic. Obviously, if you are not safely able to participate, I completely understand. But when you look at the numbers that people are splitting in the chat, and yes, Marcella was even splitting rent with a roommate back in those days. And so we really just want to hold space for the fact that we know our students are going to have incredibly different renting opportunities or challenges than we did when we were their age. So I'm sorry, I'm still obsessed with some of these answers in the chat. We've got everything from, I think the lowest number that I saw was 250, maybe $200 in rent. I did a lot around the 400 range, which is really amazing. So I really encourage you to share this with your students so they can get an idea of how much things have changed. And that's one great step in providing some context for why we want them to pay attention to a topic that may seem a little far away from them. But we do know that housing has been in the news, and it's pretty much guaranteed that some of the adults in their life may have been talking about this, and at least they will have heard these conversations about the housing crunch that we are in this country and this state at this time. So thank you so much. And Linda and Lance are part of that team here, just in case anyone's wondering or thinking I just randomly called out. These are my wonderful coworkers. Thank you guys for your answers as well. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and switch over now to the Kahoot, and we're just going to do a couple quick questions here. And hopefully you are seeing this screen now. Linda, can you give me a thumbs up if we are sharing the Kahoot screen? Fantastic. So we have 7 questions here, 10 seconds each, about housing facts in Washington. Let's see how we did. Thank you, everybody who joined for participation. So let's go back just about 20 years. If we're thinking about the median home price, we're going to take some of those outliers out. What do we think we were looking at? Lovely. We have a majority of people getting the correct answer. 203,000 was about what you were going to pay 20 years ago for a home in Washington. All right, Leah. Now let's come up to present day, the most recent data that we would have, which would be last year. And we have the same options here. How much are we estimating this has grown over the last 20 years? Lovely. You guys are on it today. This is nice. Yes, 603 would be our median now across the state. I think sometimes we all know that it can be difficult for our students to conceptualize large numbers, but sometimes providing them in context or comparison can give them a little bit better idea of how much prices have increased. Next, let's talk about rent, because we know most of our students are actually going to go into the rental market before they go into the home buying market. So if we're looking at the average rent, and I'm talking for studios, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, average it all, where are we? Very nice. Still got the majority of answers at just under $1,800 a month. So it's wild. I mean, huge increases from the numbers we were just putting into the chat. All right. Not movement at the top, but we got some movement at the bottom there. Oh, apologies. This was not meant to be in this slide deck. Do you guys want to guess what the most expensive apartment type in Walla Walla is? Walla Walla, Washington? This was originally a training that I did develop for teachers in Walla Walla, Washington. Very interesting. It is 1-bedroom apartments. Every person in Walla Walla is competing for 183 1-bedroom apartments that exist within the entire city, which is interesting. These are the kind of things that we would want to prepare our students to know. If there's that small of a market, we're probably going to want to look for roommates as we're moving out into independence. Okay, so if we were going to rank our state across other states, where do you think we stand as far as cost of living? Second, fourth, fifth, or seventh? We are not first. Okay, we are actually 7. I know it feels like we are much higher up on there, but according to the data, there's a handful of states that have a higher cost of living. However, in the top 10, that is, again, something we want our students to be prepared for as college and career ready students. Right, getting close to the end here, second to last question. So a lot of times we look at budgets and people will say, hey, you should spend X% on your housing. What percent do we normally say we should keep that housing budget within as far as best practices go? So common, whatever you want to say, common advice would say to keep it within 25 to 30% of your budget. But again, looking at numbers now, how realistic is that? I can tell you personally, my mortgage is more than 30% of my budget. So our final question will be, if we look at renters under the age of 24, how many of them are spending more than that general good advice? 10, 27, about half, or 61. And yes, over half of our young adults in Washington are paying more than 30% of their income on rent. I include this question because you may see this in any budgeting lessons that you come in or that you use in the classroom. And it's just good to be aware that sometimes these best practice rules are not going to be realistic unless we make plans like roommates or other ways to cut our housing costs. Living at home if we can. All right, let's see who our winner is. We're going to send a door prize to you with some FEP swag. Stacy, nice job, 3rd place. Nash, nice job, 2nd place. And first, I think from start to finish. Yeah, Leah, excellent job. Please message me with your name so I know who you are and I can get in contact with you tomorrow to send you a door prize. All right. Thank you so much for your participation. I hope that you're able to learn a little bit about our housing prices in Washington, and that Kahoot will also be made available for you if you would like to use it with colleagues or your students. In addition, I just would like to note, this was something we learned at the National Endowment for Financial Education Summit this year. The American Dream is now costing about $4.4 million. And we do include home ownership really in that idea of the American Dream, right? As you can see, they put some of the costs on there, an annual vacation or owning a pet. But owning a home now, we're looking at almost $1 million for that cost over a person's lifetime. And that is, this total here is looking at 4.4 million is more than 1 million more than most Americans are going to make in a lifetime, right? So when we're thinking about the American dream and we're thinking about home ownership, I have heard a lot of young people, or maybe seen on the internet, young people as well, saying that this is never going to be something that happens for them. And I think this is where we have an opportunity to really use financial education as a hope piece. It absolutely can happen for you still. Nothing is written off here in the future, but we need to have these financial education foundational skills in order to be able to understand the housing market, what's required of us, and make sure that we're maximizing the best opportunities that we can. So if you have ever struggled or your students have asked and you really want to be able to explain to them why this is in the news or what's going on, we really know that lack of affordable housing in our state has reached critical levels. Our current housing crisis is nationwide and began during the 2008 Great Recession, which of course coincided with the housing market bubble burst. And like other states, Washington has been feeling the effects of this crisis for years. Young Washington voters in the last election said cost of living was their top concern. According to a PBS Elway poll, they were most, particularly when they were voting for governor, their most common response for people 18 to 35, as far as top priority, was the economy. Homelessness and housing was second, followed by the environment. We need over 1 million new homes in Washington built within the next 20 years in order to meet demand. And over half of these new homes must be available to low-income households. I have linked here the OSPI Washington State report card. And if you plan on doing this with your students, I would recommend, if you haven't ever had a chance to look at your school or district's report card, it will give you some data there. We'll let you know how many of your students within your district identify as low income, or even how many may be experiencing homelessness. And that is always great information to have when you walk into conversations or topics like this. So in context, we know that this is not just a Washington thing. This is not only affecting our state. While we are 1 million homes short, we are 4.5 million homes short across the entire United States. We are suffering from a combination over the last few years of high prices and high interest rates, where you can see the difference there between 3.5% interest, which would have been your average in 2021, and 6.5% interest, which was your average last year. So just looking at the exact same home, the exact same down payment, you're looking at a $600 difference, which has been, not just the high prices, but those high interest rates. Luckily, rent has begun to decrease, mostly because it couldn't go up any higher than it had around 21, 23. And what we see now are looking at land use and zoning regulations, because multifamily housing is needed to solve this crisis. And low income housing is also available. So needs to become available if this crisis is going to be solved. So when we're looking at solutions, you want to have a solutions-based discussion with your students. You want to make sure that we are creating solutions that would meet these needs as well. And this is a great way to introduce economics. This is supply and demand, really. When the housing market burst, people who built homes went out of business. So for years, we built less homes. The supply went down. And then in Washington, our economy, it may not have felt like it, but it actually rebounded somewhat quicker than other states. And we were attracting a lot of new workers from other states to move here. They needed places to live. And so the demand was going up. It's a great context for reinforcing this very concrete economic concept. Excuse me. I also have a graph here that compares the gain and loss of employment, which is in the blue, compared to the net new housing units that have been built in our state. So if you have students who are more visual learners, this is a great visual representation of how we found ourselves in this situation. I love, as a former math teacher, I feel like there's a lot you could dig into with this if you wanted to. And we are now going to go into our, apologies for the slide there, our lesson activities. So I'm going to introduce you to Keys to Financial Success curriculum, which, as I mentioned before, was developed by the Philadelphia Federal Reserve Bank. It is a turnkey financial education curriculum with 10 themes and 47 lessons. It is comprehensive personal finance using the economic way of thinking. And because it is so comprehensive, the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia has been a fantastic partner organization with FEP for a long time. And they do training. So while the curriculum is free, they do require a training in order to obtain the material. We do trainings here with FEP, and we have traveled to Philadelphia, but we are proud to say we are the first state that Philadelphia has trained to do this work independently and who has come to Washington to train educators. So we are anticipating doing another training this summer. If you go through these materials and you're interested in participating in that, I would recommend that you sign up for our FEP newsletter to hear about whenever we have that free Keys training. And Linda, would it be possible for you to drop the link to sign up for the newsletter into the chat so people could do that?
Absolutely.
So what we will, though, do is make sure we have permission to share all of theme 10, which is about housing, with you. So I have put those documents onto a Google Drive that I will share the link. And within the website, or I'm sorry, within the slideshow, you'll receive each of these lessons links to the Google Drive folder as well. These are here simply as organizational slides for you. So you know the title of the lesson and all of the materials that go along with it. So we have lesson plan 10.1, and this is the one we're going to go through together. As you can see, it is quite comprehensive. We will not get through all different portions of it, but we will show you again how I've adapted this to PowerPoint so you can use it in the classroom, hopefully very easily. Lesson 10.2 will also be available for you, which is how comfortable will my place be? So we're going to talk about moving into an apartment, but the second part of that would be furnishing it, right? So the second lesson takes students through furnishing a room and looking at the total cost for that and then thinking about other ways. How else can we get furniture and apartment supply without buying it? You'll also receive the materials for 10.3, which get into if you're tired of renting, should I buy my own house? And while some of our students may not be in this place right now, again, it's that hope piece for me that you are absolutely capable of making the financial decisions that put you in a position to be a homeowner. And here are the pros and cons. And here are some examples of people who are in a position to buy and who are in a position to rent. So again, these slides are simply organizational, so you're aware of the components of each of the lesson plans. So from this point, you can see on the right-hand side, the lesson plan is very, black and white. It's a normal teaching lesson plan that you and I have seen a million times. I think we all know that we end up adapting these things to meet our students' needs. And of course, I was elementary for a long time, so I love a good PowerPoint. So what I went ahead and did was I took a lot of the material from the paper copies of the lesson plans and I adapted them into a PowerPoint that we will start now. So as you're introducing 10.1, here are the learning objectives that your students will be working through. They're going to look at criteria for choosing an apartment and use a decision-making grid to evaluate apartment options. We're going to talk about the expenses related to moving into an apartment, so we have a good idea of what this will cost us. And we're going to look at a lease agreement and practice identifying important parts of a lease agreement so that we know what we're signing. If anybody attended, we did a webinar on buying a car in the summer, and we talked about how many of those forms you have to sign when you buy a car. And I know when I sign a lease, I try my best to pay attention through the first 5, 10 pages. By the time you hit that, you start to kind of lose a little bit of what you're looking for, right? So hopefully this practice activity helps them from being overwhelmed in that real world situation. And if you have students who want to know, what are we doing? Right below there, there's your schedule. We're going to do an opening question, watch a video, group activity. There's discussion questions for you, a second activity, and an exit ticket. Of course, depending on your size of block, you might want to split this up into more than one session. Completely up to you. So I'd love to know, what matters to you when choosing an apartment? So I last rented an apartment in Arizona, and I have 2 non-negotiables. Please feel free to share your non-negotiables in the chat. I have to have a dishwasher. I have been in an apartment without a dishwasher before. It was terrible. So I have to have a dishwasher. And when I was in Arizona, I had to have a pool. I was willing to sacrifice to have a pool. It was that important to me. It was how I relaxed after school every day. Here, if I was renting in Washington, I don't think that would have been a non-negotiable for me, but let's see. We have washer, oh my gosh, Linda, thank you. Washer, dryer, high-speed internet, a safe part of town, dishwasher and AC, a washer, dryer, heat and appliances. I see washer, dryer coming up more than once. And then of course, location. That's fantastic. Gosh, I wonder what it even costs to do a load of laundry now at a laundromat. I tell you, it was $2.50 for a full load washer and dryer at my apartment complex, the last place I lived. $1 to wash and $1.50 to dry. Wow, Sarah's saying $4 to $5 to wash a load. That's incredible. Well, I'm glad you guys identified that non-negotiable, because that's actually going to be applicable to our exercise. If I can get there we go. Ooh, I love this too. Vivian has mentioned the bottom floor. I think that is a very important thing to recognize as well. So within the lesson, they give you 4 questions for your students to consider and a video for them to watch, which we will watch together now. It's short, about 2 minutes.
Dreaming of renting your own place? A personal sanctuary where you can be you. Sounds great. Renting a place is a big step. It means you're growing and learning to do things on your own. But before you start packing, here are some tips to help you choose a place that fits your needs. Take a realistic look at your income and your costs. How much can you comfortably spend on rent without compromising on healthy food or going out with friends? A good rule is to spend about 1/3 of your take-home income on housing. Remember, you'll have other new expenses too, like utility bills, internet, and renter's insurance. So you'll need a monthly budget. And what about location? Sometimes paying slightly more for a place that's close to work, school, or shopping can save you money on bus fare or gas. Weigh your options. Talk to people already living there. Is it quiet or noisy? Does the landlord fix things quickly? Is it safe? If you decide to rent, you will usually be required to sign a lease describing what you and your landlord can and can't do. A lease is a legal agreement, and violating it can have serious consequences. Learn what each section means and read it very carefully before you sign. And while it might be tempting to borrow money to furnish your new place, be careful. Credit cards and store loans charge interest and fees. Review the terms of any loan carefully and only borrow what you can afford to repay. With creativity and maybe a little help from your friends, your first rental will soon become your happy home.
So again, a short video to get them thinking about some of the criteria that would be most relevant or important to them. As I mentioned, they gave 4 questions with this. During the time I was in Walla Walla training with this activity, we put all 4 questions, I copied and pasted them onto a Word document, cut them, and then handed them out to each person, and did kind of a whip around to save time, instead of asking for like a written response from each one of these. So again, making it work to whatever fits your students. So now that they've kind of thought about criteria, we are going to give them a couple handouts. So the activity that we're going to be looking for is saying, imagine you're looking for your first apartment. What we're going to do is hand them a handout that has their alternatives on them. It's going to give them apartment A, B, and C. And actually, let me drop the link to, I'm going to go ahead and drop into the chat the link to the Google Drive in case you want to look at some of these PDF documents while I am going through the PowerPoint. And please let me know if any of the permissions are incorrect. You know how you try to make sure everything is ready to share, but sometimes something isn't. So let me know and I'll make sure that's right before the end of the webinar. So as I mentioned, we're going to give them apartments A, B, and C. I'm going to show you that handout in a moment. Then we're going to choose 4 criteria that are important based on those apartments. We're going to rank those criteria from worst to best, and then add those rankings for a total score. So we're using the PACE decision-making model. Are you familiar with PACE? If you're not, it is one of the decision-making grids that are out there, one of the decision-making strategies that are out there. And it is a great way to start kids using criteria and evaluating alternatives to make a decision. Like you actually have to go through these steps. The P stands for the problem, which it gives us here. What apartment should I choose? The A is alternatives, an apartment A, B, and C. The C in PACE is our criteria, which we decide based on our individual needs. The E is for evaluating. We do a score of 1 for the lowest and 3 for the highest, and then make a decision for D, PACE, based on your total score. So they will get one of these worksheets here on the right, as well as, oh, I had animations. These are where our alternatives go. It's going to show you the criteria now. Look at that. Beautiful. Okay, so here are our options. We have apartment A. Let's see here. $1,400 a month, a first floor 2-bedroom apartment, newly constructed, 15-minute walk from campus, small with little closet space, washer and dryer room located on the floor above you. No pool, no workout room, 16-unit complex, quiet residential neighborhood. So looking at these descriptions, we see a lot of criteria identifying themselves, right? So we have price, we have location as far as floor, we have number of bedrooms, we have age of the apartment, we have location from campus, we have closet space, we have washer dryer, amenities, size of the complex, location as far as neighborhood. So If we are looking at A, B, and C, first thing that's going to pop out to me is the amount of rent. As you can see, A is for $1,400, B is $1,800, and C is $2,200. All of these for 2-bedroom apartments. And Vivian just made an excellent note in the chat. Thank you so much, Vivian. If you have a mobility disability, none of the apartments in the sample would work unless there is an elevator. And that is an amazing example of recognizing the lack of cultural competency in some of these turnkey programs. And in that case, I think it would be absolutely reasonable to acknowledge that or make adjustments to this based on, making it more equitable. And again, thank you so much, Vivian, for pointing that out. So if we focus on the price, and then let's also look at our washer dryer, because that was something that so many people in this chat or in this group applied as an important criteria. So what I did was put the PACE decision-making model into a table here. So you could fill it out with the students if you needed to give them more scaffolded support, or maybe just give them one example. So for here, I've made rent a criteria. We have apartment A, of course, the lowest price gets a score of 3. Apartment B gets a score of 2, and the highest price gets a score of 1. Oops, I'm going to kind of go back into the PowerPoint mode of it now. I know it's not presenting, but can you still see my screen? Awesome. So if I went in here and I added washer dryer. So we'll just do, okay. So I believe that apartment A had 1 floor up. Was that correct? Okay, if we go back to our apartment options, B contains a washer and dryer in the kitchen. And C doesn't say. Am I crazy?
Laundromat nearby.
Laundromat nearby building. Thank you, Lance. My goodness. We have 1 floor up. We have in unit for number 2 for apartment B, and next building for apartment C. So if this was important criteria to you, we would be giving the least option to me is having to go to a whole nother building, right? So that would be our 1 point lowest meets the least of the criteria. Now, 1 point for the highest rent plus 1 point for the worst washer dryer situation means this has a total score of 2 now. In unit, that's great. So we have a 3 for that, giving us a total score of 5. And this has the cheapest rent. It had a score of 3 for that. Only going up 1, it puts it in second position. So again, 5. So now after 2 criteria, we're tied between apartment A and B. But that doesn't mean that we would necessarily throw out C until we'd looked at everything. So again, every student can fill this out differently depending on what criteria is most important to them. And you definitely would want to maybe explore how, if you are going to share some of these costs, like where would that figure in as well? Any questions on the first activity? Oh, and Vivian has another note in the chat. The first one on the first floor might work, but you might have to do your laundry at a laundromat. Again, wonderful insight. Thank you, Vivian, for sharing. And she lives in a community where the closest laundromat is 25 minutes away. Wow. What a hardship to have to travel so far just to have clean clothes. All right, we're going to get back into presentation mode and move over to the second activity in this lesson. So students have now practiced looking at apartments, looking at criteria. Oh, quickly, a great extension for this, if you're willing, would be to let them look for apartments, actual apartments in your town, or using apartments.com or Zillow to identify maybe more like real life examples of what apartments on. You can screen cap those and give them options for that. So if you wanted to give them multiple options for practice, I think that would be kind of your second step, reinforcement. The next section of the lesson wants students to think about what are the costs and decisions that you make with independent living beyond just where am I going to lay my head down at night? And they identify three main topics here. First, excuse me, the cost of moving. Can you afford to move yourself? And this is two parts. This is the deposits or fees for your location, but also the actual act of moving. I don't know about you guys, but the first time I did a big move, I did not budget for boxes, which it just didn't occur to me that I would actually have to buy some for the larger things, which I did. Never had to buy a new box before. It was crazy. But sometimes we don't remember, it's not just the truck. There's a lot of other supplies that can cost. And definitely they reinforce this budget, the idea of a budget. You'll find it many times within the Keys for Financial Success curriculum. How much can you afford to spend? Recognizing that, needs versus wants when we come to those criteria that we're evaluating is important because we pay for those wants. Our amenities are always going to add on to our rent. And then the lease agreement. When you are renting a property, this is a requirement, and these students need to know that this is a legally binding document, a contractual agreement that really doesn't leave a lot of wiggle room in some cases. So what you see here would be a visual representation of what the lesson plan would say, have this discussion. So within the lesson, they're going to give you prompts with your students. I just provided the slide, for your visual learners or however. Okay, so let's talk about the cost of moving. I am going to put, let's see here. I think I have nine circles in the chat. What are some of the costs of moving? What are some of the costs associated with moving? And then they differentiate between moving in costs or the actual act of moving. So let's see. We have deposit and application fees showing up in the chat. Setting up utilities. Thanks, Leah. Credit check fees. That's that application, right? If they have to check your credit, they are going to want you to pay for that. First and last month's rent. Absolutely. Furniture. Yep, absolutely. If you don't have furniture, you're going to have to find a way to function within. Movers. Awesome. Great suggestion. Let's go ahead and look at the ones that the lesson identified here in blue. So you guys got a lot of them. Rent for first month, rent for last month, cleaning deposit. I personally have never paid one of those, but it was listed in the lesson. I'm sure that, some people here probably had that experience. Security deposit, utilities deposit. Did anybody else have to pay? They pay the utilities ahead, so they make you give I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but you just have to kind of run an account because they won't let you get into the deficit. Yes. And then of course, the moving in costs, which they call the truck, the movers, the boxes, the tape, the bubble wrap. Okay, now I think they missed out on three really, really important ones. And those are the ones in pink. They're not mentioned in the lesson. Anybody see something here that you think is missing? One of them was mentioned earlier. Let me guess it. Give you a minute to think about it. Feeding your friends for helping you move, says Marcella. Yes, that's a great social emotional skill to mix in with this lesson, right? If your friends help you move, you're then helping them move, and you should definitely feed them. I came up with these three. Renter's insurance to me is a requirement now. I remember when I first rented, it was optional, but at this point, I do not believe that it is. And so the last 3 apartments, I was required to hold a specific amount in renter's insurance. And while it was small, under $20 a month, this is definitely something we want our students to be aware of and build into that budget. Somebody mentioned monthly parking in the chat earlier, and how expensive monthly parking has gotten, particularly depending on whether you're in an urban or rural setting. We know our urban areas here in Washington, parking is a huge issue. If you're working downtown, you can add an extra parking cost onto that as well. Students might want to know that covered parking might cost more than uncovered parking, just simple things like that. And no one mentions pet rent or pet fees, but I feel like that's just something that a lot of our students do have pets or want to have pets. It's important that they recognize that they're going to be charged, in most cases, a monthly fee, an additional rent for that pet. I remember that being a real shock to me. So something that we want to make sure that we are, or perhaps a flat fee, right? A one-time flat fee, or both, for having the pet. So again, we just want to make sure that they're aware there's a lot of things in this budget, but I love Tammy's comment. You always have to fill the pantry, and you got to fill your cleaning supplies too. So that's another one I think would be very reasonable to add. Okay, so when we're preparing a budget, they are going to give you a slideshow that I also gave you in the Google Drive. It's 3 slides. And it's very plain. So I zhuzhed it. I call this me zhuzhing it up a little bit. So that's where you see the slide 2 note. So when you're talking about budgeting with your students and preparing this budget, the lesson identifies, again, 25 to 35% of net income. Now, remember from our Kahoot earlier, we were looking at 25 to 30% as the recommended portion of the pie that should go to housing. The lesson is going to here identify 5% more. It's a rule of thumb, but I'm really going to leave it to you guys whether you feel it's a valuable part of the lesson. If it's not realistic, especially depending on where you're living, I don't know if it will be encouraging or it will work against that hope piece. Because in reality, this was the rule of thumb for the past. Will it apply in the present? Hopefully, yes, as this issue stabilizes. And granted, having housing at 60% of your budget is a recipe for disaster. But I think, especially if you were looking at apartments, like if you did real apartments for that first activity, or you even let them spend a little bit of time looking and seeing how much average rent is in your area, they might be able to have more of a discussion on what's a realistic percentage. What are we looking for here? And what number would we say we absolutely really shouldn't go over just in the interest of self-preservation? And of course, we can establish the difference between best practices and, sometimes things don't work out exactly the way we hope they will, and you always have to adjust, modify and adjust. They identify personal and financial goals as an important part of your budget. Also, income, clearly, lifestyle, fixed expenses, moving in costs, and then, there you go, the costs of setting up the house, which is kind of the pantry cleaning, I think, area we were talking about. Let's see. All right, so the budget activity, or the budget discussion is really supposed to be a discussion. They do not provide in this lesson any concrete numbers in order to do the budget. Instead, we're going to shift to the lease agreement activity, which is, I think, a really great real world practice. As you can see here on the visual, you get a draft lease agreement. This is the first page of that lease agreement. So clearly we have, Alice Smith at 123 2nd Street. This is in Newark, Delaware, which is interesting. So we have on this first page, we have our offer to rent, purpose, the lease term, the amount of rent. And then we get into some of the things we really want them to be paying attention to. The late fee. right? Recognizing when we as educators say there is a penalty for turning in your work late, we are mirroring a real world context, guys. There are consequences for turning things in late. And in this case, the consequence is more money. $250 after day 5. We have a security deposit, right of entry, the utilities, maintenance, repair, and alterations. The lease agreement that you have in the PDF is 2 pages long, as I mentioned. This is just the first page. We want to make sure, again, it's this binding legal document thing. The idea that once you have put your signature to this, you are by law beholden to the rules you've agreed to. It's accountability, which we know with our young people can be, sort of hard to define and really give them examples of. Here we are. And by signing your name, you have agreed. Oh, excuse me one moment. The second part, missing a slide. So I'm going to go ahead and just shift over to a different screen to show you this part briefly. Apologies. The lease agreement questions. Are you able to see those questions now? Awesome. Thank you. As you can see, we're looking at number 1. Which utilities, if any, does the landlord pay? Going through this first page here, we're going to see that a landlord is going to pay for hot water. That is it. And then a second question, if the tenant were to fall down a wet flight of stairs and break their leg while in the apartment building, could the tenant hold the landlord legally responsible for their medical bill? These are really important questions to consider. Have they ever even thought about what would happen if they tripped and fell down the stairs of their apartment and broke their leg? Did you know that somebody else could be responsible if in cases of, liability? So, excuse me, you can go through the questions. You could have them fill out each one. You could do a scavenger hunt around, slice up the questions, put them around the room and have them scavenger hunt for things. But I really like the idea of making them work through and kind of hunt and find using these, oh my gosh, headings. I'm going to call them headings. Kind of like how in elementary school, we would teach the kids how to read through nonfiction text. This is a great practice and reinforcement in that. So that would be the second part, or the third activity within the lesson. And the lesson plan will give you a closing, which I turned into a exit ticket. Went ahead and put it up on a screen so you could have it as a discussion base or get a written response if you wanted. So they want the students to identify those important criteria or factors to consider when choosing an apartment. And again, based on the first activity, this would probably vary according to what the student identified as their most important criteria. The common moving in costs, again, the lesson will identify 7, maybe 6. We kind of looked at an extra 3. You could add in, setting up the house as even an extra cost. So those are some great things for the kids to remember and reinforce. And then some of the important things to identify within a lease agreement as well. So that takes us through 10.1. And if you were to go through the rest of the slideshow that I will provide for you, 10.2 is set up in the same way as is 10.3. So you can use the PowerPoint to move through the lesson if you choose. But again, you're more than welcome to just use the keys to financial success materials as they are as well. Are there any questions at all that I can answer as we kind of head into our last 5 minutes together? Ooh, we have a comment from Vivian on a survey on Facebook about 6 years ago, and 68% of those that responded paid more than 50% of their income in housing. And that was just for rent and mortgage. Wow. Incredible. Right.
Is there a preset curriculum that could even be taught as early as elementary schools? Our nonprofit is willing to sponsor something like that.
There absolutely is, Jewel. I would love to connect with you about that question. I spent a lot of time in the elementary space, so yes, absolutely.
I have your email, so I'll connect you separately.
Wonderful, thank you. We do find that research shows that the earlier that you start, the more you have. There's a lot of great outcomes, learning outcomes that are demonstrated, especially in the elementary level. All right, I'm going to go ahead and apologies. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the slideshow there. I will let you know that there are also going to be some extension activities at the end of the slideshow as well, some NGPF questions of the day. And as actually, you know what? I'm just going to show this really quick before I let everybody go. So at the end of your slideshow, you will have, for example, what % of 18 to 24-year-olds live with their parents? Any guesses? Especially nowadays. What do you think, Lance? You got a number for me?
I'd say 70, 75.
70, 75? I like that. Okay, I love it. Somebody actually got so close in the chat. 56%, according to the United States Census, our latest census data is at 56%. Kerry was at 57, which was extremely close. So we are seeing a much higher, as you can kind of see there, compared to the past. If we look over here on like 1960s, you see how low some of those numbers are, and comparing the percentage of men and women. Interesting. And then I'm also going to include, this is some follow-up questions. Great. You know, what age do you envision yourself living on your own? This is appropriate for all age groups, even the younger kids, right? And having them hypothesize why. Why is this increased? This percentage of this age group increased so much? And I will also include for you an extension article that includes the 10 best places to live in Washington State in 2024. Anybody have any guesses where the first place is? So, or any, I'll tell you that my hometown is on the list. And so it's an article on the 10 best places to live. And then what I went ahead and did, very nice, Bellingham's on the list, Vancouver's on the list. Yes, Spokane is there. I don't know if I agree with number one. You gotta tell me what you think. They said Seattle. Spokane and Vancouver rounding out top 3. And then next to it, I put the median rent prices in that area. So again, if you wanted to do some extension and look at this, add some geography, look at it across the state, have them consider for their future where they may want to be, there's just a little extension there for you. If you live on Whidbey Island, I would be biased as well.
Right?
Absolutely. And that is the content that I have for you all today. We're ending just a minute early. Again, thank you so much for being here. I very much appreciate your time, especially as we head towards the end of the year. I know how busy this time is for educators. Thank you so much. If there's anything we at FEP can do to support you integrating financial education, let me know. We will make sure you get the links to all these materials so you can start implementing them whenever you wish. And I will stick around for a couple minutes to answer any questions. Thank you so much, Karen. I hope you have a lovely evening.